Hi, people. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you today, but here I am virtually, and I hope you're able to accompany my reasoning and follow what I have to say. My paper is called Strategic Complicity in Neoliberal Educational Policy, and I want to focus on a particular aspect of complicity in current language teaching policy at a government level in Brazil. So I call this strategic complicity. Loic Wacom, the French thinker, refers to neoliberalism as a doxa, a paradigm taken for granted that acquires normativity and naturalness. He characterizes neoliberalism as a system that promises prosperity through economic deregulation and social dismantling under the aegis of individual responsibility, which he says is another name for collective irresponsibility and mercantile egoism. The doxa that Wacom is referring to manifests itself in education under the buzzword of the knowledge economy. This in turn refers to the way that, again, under the current neoliberal doxa, practices of knowledge and learning interact with practices of economics. This then takes the market as more than a metaphor, an actual organizing principle. As Fiona Patrick claims in a paper in 2013, through the doxa of the knowledge economy, and I quote, "Education has been incorporated into an agenda of wealth production at national state level," unquote. In this agenda of wealth production, education is portrayed as the driving force of economic growth and development, and promises the much sought-after capacity of competitiveness under globalized market conditions. And how is education supposed to do this? If one delves further into the doxa, one unearths what Olson and Peters call knowledge capitalism. The knowledge economy, then, is based on exploiting resources of immaterial, that is, intellectual and effective labor, rather than the physical labor of early capitalism. The knowledge economy further conceives each individual as being economically responsible and economically self-interested. Intellectual and symbolic capital thus gain currency, and the onus is on the individuals in the knowledge economy to become self-regulating. From this perspective of the neoliberal doxa, the objective of education is to produce self-interested, self-regulatory knowledge workers. That's the term, knowledge workers. Curiously, the much emphasized focus on the self-interested individual is couched in a discourse of social justice in which access becomes a key word. However, not access to transformed, more equitable social conditions, but the possibility of access to the same knowledges and abilities previously accessible only to learners of more privileged classes or groups. Thus, access to knowledge is provided to all by state governments that proclaim the neoliberal doxa. Apparently, the learner simply has to have the capacity to take advantage of it. It is within this scenario that I would now like to focus on what I consider a policy of strategic complicity with the neoliberal doxa, exemplified by the Brazilian government's current policy of language teaching within a wider policy of higher education, student international mobility called Ciência Sem Fronteiras. First, some quick data on the program. Since 2011, 101,000 scholarships have been offered to undergraduate and postgraduate students in the applied sciences for a period of 12 to 18 months at a foreign university with which the Brazilian government has established an agreement. Normal foreign student fees are paid by the Brazilian government to each foreign university for each Brazilian student received. Undergraduates are given priority. and have to have slightly above average marks. And they have to have completed between 20 and 90% of their courses. Besides this, they have to attain the minimum language proficiency requirement established by each foreign university. That's around, mainly for English-speaking universities, it's TOEFL B2. The program claims to contemplate universities of excellence, and the majority, though not all, of these so-called universities of excellence tend to be, what a coincidence, in the US, Canada, and Britain. Proficiency in English thus becomes the most sought-after language requirement for candidates. In 2013, the government noticed that the vast majority of candidates failed the language proficiency requirements, and sending them to learn English abroad proved too expensive. So in 2014, the connected program, Idiomas Sem Fronteiras, was launched. In this program, the language departments, initially English, of public universities have been invited to participate by offering distance and presence extension courses in English to all their university students who are interested in the program of scholarships abroad. These courses are taught by undergraduate students of English and count towards their pre-service language teaching education. Pre-service teaching hours are limited, though, to 20 hours per week, and they are paid for very well above average market prices. The administration training and materials development for these courses is limited, however, to graduates of language and applied linguistics. So anyone working with theoretical linguistics or literature is not welcome to coordinate these courses. It's almost a market reserved for applied linguistics. Considering that both the Ciência Sem Fronteiras and its language component, the Idiomas Sem Fronteiras, are policies produced by a leftist Workers' Party government with an agenda of social justice colored with neoliberal nuances, the policies show, on the one hand, clear complicity with the neoliberal doxa of the knowledge economy and its view of education as producing self-interested and self-regulating individuals, and on the other hand, preoccupations with social justice and the social collective. It is individual students who opt not only for applying for the scholarships, but also who choose where they want to go. In this sense, they rely on the linguistic, cultural, and symbolic capital they have accrued as individuals. This official complicity with neoliberal doxa at an individual level is a manifestation of another aspect of the same doxa at a state level, that of achieving, through a knowledge economy, that is, the linguistic and content-based knowledges brought home by the totality of individual students returning from abroad, increased competitiveness in the global markets. So a policy which focuses on students accruing individual social, linguistic, cultural capital, going abroad as individuals, choosing where they want to go, is based on the idea that they will come back to the country, bringing all of their symbolic and cultural capital. And it is the collective as a nation, the nation as a collective, which will benefit from this in producing greater competitiveness in the global markets. However, this complicity with the neoliberal doxa is complemented by a desire for social justice, in the sense of providing access to knowledge for all. When it became clear in 2013 that the few students that had proficiency in English and could take advantage of the scholarships abroad were those who came from socioeconomically privileged classes, the government immediately launched the Idiomas Sem Fronteiras program to collectively offer the linguistic and cultural capital that was lacking at an individual level. So a few individuals of the privileged classes benefited initially from the scholarship international mobility program, but the great majority of the collectivity of the nation could not, because they did not have the the linguistic capital, the knowledge of a foreign language. By conscripting and mobilizing the help of foreign language departments of public universities across the country, the government is clearly mobilizing a social collective to contribute to and be complicit with a program which will equip individuals to exercise individual choices and decisions and become self-interested and self-regulatory. Another level of complicity between collective interests and neoliberal doxa is that of the undergraduate pre-service language teachers who are invited to, but not obliged to, teach in these courses. If they comply, they receive individual benefits, such as extra credits and high wages, as I've said before. But again, within the concept of the knowledge economy and its market metaphor. These students will become, from the perspective of the doxa, competent knowledge workers and make themselves more marketable upon graduation at an individual level. However, also from the perspective of the social justice ambitions of the government, with its eyes on the collectivity, these competent knowledge workers of the future will benefit the social collectivity of the nation by hopefully raising the level of educational institutions. These in turn will supposedly produce more and better individual learners as future knowledge workers who will feed into the knowledge economy. I take this reading of strategic complicity between individual interests as a manifestation of neoliberal deregulation and collective interests as a social justice preoccupation from the work of the Argentinian thinker Enrique Dussel and his concept especially of exteriority and transmodernity. Dussel takes his concept of exteriority in turn from Marx's idea of the working class as being exterior to, that is, excluded from, capital, and at the same time being subsumed by, constituting the very notion of capital. So exteriority means apparently being on the outside, but in fact contributing to the constitution of something else which you are excluded from. It's this paradoxical, complicitous relationship. Dussel claims that European modernity at the moment of the colonial encounter in the Americas excluded the Amerindian as being primitive and pre-modern. It was this very exclusion, this looking at the Amerindian as exterior, that actually constituted, according to Dussel, European modernity as modernity. In this sense, neoliberalism cannot succeed in its project of deregulation and individual self-interest, in which concerns of the collective or the state are excluded. As Cahill, 2011, shows, in spite of the economic crisis of 2008 generated by neoliberal excess, and in spite of greater regulation since 2008 and greater public resistance, neoliberalism persists stronger than ever. But as an ideology marked specifically or especially by commodification. Commodification of knowledge, of labor, of learners, and of education. Together with this commodification, we have utilitarian values, which mean maximal profit, smallest amount of investment, and the greatest amount of profit. To attempt to slow down the process, Cahill calls for socially protective rather than socially destructive policies. In this sense, socially protective policies are not those that oppose neoliberal doxa, but those that seek to reduce its effects. Thus, it is important to perceive how collectivity and its corollaries, convention and regulation, are not exterior to individuality, but in fact constitute it, forcing individuality to define itself by constantly negating collectivity. This is the complicitous nature of the connection between individuality and collectivity. One possibility to break out of this paradigm may be through through strategic complicity, as I have tried to show in the case of the Brazilian educational policies. Being strategically complicit with a doxa, which aims to reduce its effects, thus involves not negating that which is exterior to the doxa, for example, social justice and collectivity. Rather, by doing this, it involves negating the very process of negation which sustains the doxa. There are other interesting examples of this in the same policies, such as that which seeks to make Brazil a protagonist in international negotiations with prestigious universities from the global north. Rather than assume the historical identity attributed to Brazil by the global north as third world, underdeveloped, etc., the Brazilian government is very conscious of the neoliberal doxa of the market and the fact that it is the universities of the global north that need the capital that Brazil can offer. Given also the persistence of unequal relations of power inherited from a long history of colonization, what Aníbal Quijano called coloniality, the Brazilian government negotiators seek to, dare I say, neoliberally deregulate the persisting subject positions, persisting historical subject positions of colonizer, colonized, modern, primitive, developed or undeveloped, attributed by a history of colonization and economic inequities, by demanding that the terms of the conversation be changed. So the Brazilian negotiators demand that the terms of the historically stereotypical conversation be changed. That is, Brazil poses now as a provider in the face of the needy, and it thus uses this paradoxical apparent inversion in order to garner privileges of interest to the Brazilian collectivity, such as not submitting to the previously common demands for the imposition of a particular form of English, British or American, on the part of state agencies, such as the Fulbright Commission, the British Council, etc. In other words, Brazilian official discourse is strategically complicit with and uses the neoliberal discourse of deregulation as a tactic to reap benefits not for individual profit, as per neoliberal doxa, but for the Brazilian collective, the student body. This, to a certain extent, disturbs the harmonic view of equitable and harmonious international academic diplomacy characterized by mutual interests, as portrayed by Jane Knight. Such, then, are the intricacies of the strategic complicity with neoliberal doxa. However, in the midst of such highly risky complicities, it is worth taking heed of the caution the Portuguese thinker Souza Santos calls for in what he terms epistemological vigilance, and the constant need for self-reflection, critical self-reflection, bringing to mind the words of St. Augustine. And I quote, "I have converted myself into a question for myself." Thank you.